Sorry about that. I wanted to go upstairs to eat something. I ordered shawarma, but then my stepfamily bought McDonald's. They bought two small cheeseburgers, so I ate the cheeseburgers. That's why I won. I shut the camera off. So I eat a lot, man. I'm God. I eat a lot, obviously, right? Yeah. So let me read. I'll read a good 5 pages, and after the 5 pages, I'll end it here. Okay. This is chapter 3. 3 is company. You ought to go quietly, and you ought to go soon, said Gandalf. 2 or 3 weeks had passed, and still Frodo made no sign of getting ready to go. So this is 3 weeks. Chapter 3 starts off 3 weeks later from when Gandalf and Frodo last met, obviously, when Gandalf told Frodo about the ring, when Samwise Gamgee was eavesdropping, right? So Frodo's getting ready to leave the Shire, obviously. I know, but it's difficult to do both, he objected. If I just vanished, like Bilbo, the tale will be all over the Shire in no time. Of course you mustn't vanish, said Gandalf. That won't do at all, I said soon, not instantly. If you can think of any way of slipping out of the Shire without being generally known, it'll be worth a little delay, but you must not delay too long. What about the autumn on or after our birthday? Asked Frodo. I think I could probably make some arrangements by then. So Frodo's pretty much telling Gandalf, "Hey, how can I slip out of the Shire? How can I leave the Shire quietly without raising mumbles and whispers and rumors? Obviously, just like when Bilbo left the Shire, it raised questions. Frodo doesn't want that. Frodo doesn't want the same situation to happen. Obviously, right? To tell the truth, he was very reluctant to start, now that it had come to the point. Bag End seemed a more desirable residence than it had been for years, and he wanted to savor as much as he could of his last summer in the Shire when autumn came. He knew that part, at least of his heart, would think more kindly of journeying, as it always did at that season. He had indeed privately made up his mind to leave on his 50th birthday. So Frodo's 50 years old, remember that. Whereas in the movie, he's in his 20s, obviously, right? Bilbo's 128th, it seemed somehow the proper day on which to set out and follow him. So Bilbo is now 128 years old because it's 17 years later, obviously. Whereas when in chapter 1, his birthday, Bilbo was 111 years old, obviously, right? Right. It seemed somehow the proper day on which to set out and follow him. Following Bilbo was uppermost in his mind, and the one thing that made the thought of leaving bearable. He thought as little as possible about the ring and where it might lead him in the end, but he did not tell all his thoughts to Gandalf. What the wizard guessed was always difficult to tell. He looked at Frodo and smiled. Very well, he said. I think that will do, but it must not be any later. I'm getting very right anxious. In the meanwhile, do take care, and don't let out any hint of where you're going, and see that Sam Gamgee does not talk. If he does, I shall really turn him into a toad. So Gandalf's pretty much telling Frodo, look, man, whatever you and Sam leaving the Shire, what you're planning, try to keep it as quiet as you can, obviously, and make sure Sam keeps his mouth shut. If Sam speaks, I can turn him into a toad. As a joke, obviously, right? Because Gandalf is a wizard, he can turn people into things. You know what I'm saying? As for where I'm going, said Frodo, it will be difficult to give that away, for I have no clear idea myself yet. Don't be absurd, said Gandalf. I am not warning you against leaving an address at the post office, but you are leaving the Shire, and that should not be known until you are far away. So Gandalf pretty much wants Frodo and Sam to leave the Shire quietly, obviously. And you must go, or at least set out, either north, south, west, or east, and the direction should certainly not be known. I have been so taken up with the thoughts of leaving Bag End and saying a farewell that I have never even considered the direction, said Frodo. For where am I to go, and by what shall I steer? What is it? What is to be my quest? Bilbo want to find a treasure there and back again, and I go to lose one and not return as far as I can see. But you cannot see very far, said Gandalf. Neither can I. It may be your task to find the cracks of Dune, but that quest may be for others. I do not know. At any rate, you are not ready for that long road yet. No, indeed, said Frodo, but in the meantime, that course I might take. Towards danger, but not too rashly, nor too straight, answered the wizard. If you want my advice, make for Rivendell. That journey should not prove too perilous, though the road is less easy than it was, and it will grow worse as the year fails. So Ganon was telling Frodo, I recommend you take the path to Rivendell, obviously, on your dangerous journey, obviously, right? Rivendell, said Frodo, very good, I'll go east, and I will make for Rivendell. I will take Sam to visit the elves. He will be delighted. He spoke lightly, but his heart was moved suddenly with desire to see the house of Elrond, half elven, and breathe the air of that deep valley, where many of the fair folk still dwelt in peace. One summer's evening, an astonishing piece of news reached the Ivy Bush and Green Dragon. Giants and other potentates on the borders of the Shire were forgotten for more important matters. Mr. Frodo was selling Bag End. Indeed, he had already sold it to the Sackville Bagtons. So Frodo sold some of his stuff to the Sackville Bagtons. Obviously, as I told you before, the Sackville Bagtons they wanted some of what Frodo's possessions. Obviously, right. For a nice bit too, said some, at a bargain price. So Frodo's rich, obviously, right? Said others, and that's more likely when Mistress Lobia, as the buyer, Otho had died some years before at the disappointed age of 102. Just why Mr. Frodo was selling his beautiful hold was even more debatable than the price. A few held the theory, supported by the nods and hints of Mr. Baggins himself, that Frodo's money was running out. He was going to leave Hobbiton and live a quiet way of the proceeds of the sales down in the Buckland among his Brandenburg relations. As far from the Sackville Baggins as may be, some added, but so firmly fixed had the notions of the immeasurable wealth of the Bagginses of Bag End become that most found this hard to believe, harder than any other reason, one reason that their fancy could suggest. The most it suggested a dark and yet unrevealed plot by Gandalf. Though he kept himself very quiet and did not go about by day, it was well known that he was hiding up in Bag End, but however removal might fit in with the designs of the wizardry. There was no doubt about the fact. Frodo Baggins was going back to Buckland. Yes, I shall be moving this autumn, he said. Mary Brandenburg is looking out for a nice little home for me, or perhaps a small house. As a matter of fact, Mary's help, he had already chosen and bought a little house in Crickhollow in the country beyond Bucklebury. That's how Sam, Mary, and Pippin ended up being married along the way, obviously. To all but Sam, he pretended he was going to settle down permanently, obviously. The decision to set. So Frodo, I think, he's trying to give a good excuse why he's leaving the Shire, obviously. Why he's leaving the Shire, obviously, right? To all but Sam, he pretended he was going to settle down permanently. The decision to set out eastwards had suggested the idea of him for Buckland was on the eastern borders of the Shire, and as he had lived there in his childhood, his going back would at least seem credible. Gandalf stayed in the Shire for over 2 months. Then one evening at the end of June, soon after Frodo's plan, obviously, right? Frodo's friend had finally arranged. He suddenly announced that he was going off again next morning. Only for a short while, I hope, he said, but I'm going down beyond the southern borders to get some news if I can. I have been idle longer than I should, he spoke lightly, but it seemed to Frodo that he looked rather worried. Has anything happened, he asked. Well, no, but I have heard something that has made me anxious and needs looking into. If I think it's necessary after all for you to get off at once, I shall come back immediately, or at least send word. In the meantime, stick to your plan. Be more careful than ever, especially with the ring. Let me impress on you once more. Don't use it. So Gandalf was saying, Frodo, look, stick to your plan of you and Sam leaving the Shire. Whatever happens, I'm going to leave. Whatever happens, do not put the ring on because the enemy can be suspicious of your whereabouts. You can sense the presence of the ring, obviously. The Eye of Sauron can see you, obviously, right? Which is symbolic, obviously. He went off at dawn. It may be back any day, he said. At the very latest, I shall come back for the farewell party. I think, after all, you may need my company on the road. At first, Frodo was a good deal disturbed, and wondered often what Gandalf could have heard, but his uneasiness wore off, and in the fine weather, he forgot his troubles for a while. Again, this is not in the movie, man. All this dialogue and scenes are not in the movie, obviously. Hence why when I say the movie is 20% of the book, I really mean it. The book is 20% of the movie. The movie is 20% of the book. But again, Peter Jackson had no choice. He had to cut out all these scenes because you can't cram all this in a 3-hour movie. No way. If you want to follow just 70% of the story, you got to make a minimum of six movies. If you want to follow like 90+% of the story, you got to make like 8-9 movies, man. Because the Lord of the Rings is so rich in depth, it's crazy. Obviously, right? Right? At first, Frodo was a good deal disturbed and wondered often what Gandalf could have heard. but his uneasiness wore off. Right? And in the fine weather he forgot his troubles for a while. The Shire had seldom seen so a fair summer, or so rich an autumn. The trees were laden with apples, honey was dripping in the combs, whatever it is, and the corn was tall and full. Autumn was well underway before Frodo began to worry about Gandalf again. September was passing, so this is like months later, right? September was when Frodo last spoke to Gandalf. September was passing, and there was still no news of him. The birthday and the removal drew nearer, and still he did not come or send word. So Frodo's waiting for Gandalf, and Gandalf hasn't come back yet, right? Again, this is not in the movie, man. Back End began to be busy. Some of Frodo's friends came to stay and help him with the packing. There was Fredgar Bulger and Folko Bolton. These characters you don't see in the movie, right? Of course, he has special friends Pippin Took and Mary Brownybrook. Between them, they turned the whole place upside down. On September 20th, 2 cover arts went off laden to the Buckland, conveying the furniture and goods that Frodo had not sold to his new home by the way of the Brandywine Bridge. The next day, Frodo became really anxious and kept a constant lookout for Gandalf. So Frodo was wondering when Gandalf would come back, obviously. Gandalf has been away for months since they last spoke, right? Thursday, his birthday morning dawned as fair. There's some noise. Give me a second. Give me a second. I'm gonna check to see if there's someone there. All right, I'm back. I'm gonna continue reading. Obviously, right? There's still some noise, so you have to bear with me. I only have a good 2 pages left, and I'm done my read along. I'm only gonna read like 5 pages today. I don't feel like reading a lot of pages. And tomorrow I'll continue off, and I'll read a good like 10, 15 pages. I'll read 10 pages tomorrow, and then I'll finish it off in my third part. Then I'm gonna go to the store, get beer and smokes. Then I'm gonna drink my beer, get shawarma, and enjoy the show. Then go to bed. I'm killing time here, but I mean, there's noise. There's some noise. Let me check, see if it's still there. Right. Sorry about that. I just want to make sure there's no noise. I told you I have no choice but to make it during the day. I'll be done here in a good, I don't know. I'll read a good like 2 more pages, and I'll end the read along, and I'll babble on for the remaining of the video, and I'll just continue the rest tomorrow. Because I'm not really in the mood of reading that much pages today. I'm kind of lazy today. You'd rather have me babble on than read, anyways, right? Right. So on September 20th, 2 cover carts went off laden to the Buckland, conveying the furniture and goods that Frodo had not sold to his new home by ways of the Brandywine Bridge. The next day, Frodo became really anxious and kept a constant lookout for Gandalf. So Frodo has been looking out for Gandalf for months now, right? Thursday, his birthday morning, dawned as fair and clear as it has long ago for Bilbo's great party. Still, Gandalf did not appear. Right? In the evening, Frodo gave his farewell feast. It was quite small, just a dinner for himself and his four helpers, but he was troubled and felt in no mood for it. The thought that he would so soon have to part with his young friends weighed on his heart. He wondered how he would break it to them. The four younger hobbits were, however, in high spirits. So Frodo is sad because he knows he's about to leave the Shire, and he's wondering how his friends are going to react by if they were to hear the news by him leaving. Obviously, the four younger hobbits were, however, in high spirits, and the party soon became very cheerful in spite of Gandalf's absence. Again, this is not in the movie, man. See what I say when I say the book is different from the movie. Yeah, man. The four younger hobbits were, however, in high spirits, and the party soon became very cheerful in spite of Gandalf's absence. Excuse me, I'm sorry you got to hear that. The dining room was bare, except for a table and chairs, but the food was good, and there was good wine. Frodo's wine had not been included in the sale to the Sackville Baggins, obviously. But Frodo sold a lot of his stuff to the Sackville Baggins, obviously. Whatever happens to the rest of my stuff, when the SBBs get their claws on it, at any rate, I have found a good home for this, said Frodo, as he drained his glass. It was the last drop of old Wynyards. When they had sung many songs and talked of many things they had done together, they toasted Bilbo's birthday, and they drank his health and froze together according to Frodo's custom, obviously. So Frodo, every time when Frodo does a birthday, he always honors Bilbo, obviously. Even though Bilbo has been gone for almost 17 years, right? Then they went out for a sniff of air and glimpses of stars, and they went to bed. Frodo's party was over, and Gandalf had not come. So Frodo has been waiting for Gandalf for months, ever since the last minute. Gandalf have not returned, obviously. The next morning, they were busy packing another cart with the remainder of the luggage. Merry took charge of this and drove off with Fatty. That is Fredgar Bulger. Someone must get there and warm the house before you arrive, said Merry. We'll see you later the day after tomorrow if you don't go to sleep on the way. Falco went home after lunch, but Pippin remained behind. Frodo was restless and anxious, listening in vain for a sound of Gandalf. So Frodo was still waiting for Gandalf. Gandalf hasn't returned, obviously. He decided to wait till nightfall. After that, if Gandalf wanted him urgently, he would go to Crickhollow and might even get there first, for Frodo was going on foot. His plan for pleasure and that last look at the Shire, as much as any other reason, was to walk from Hobbiton to Buckleberry Ferry, taking it fairly easy. Remember in the movie when Mary's like, Buckleberry Ferry, follow me? That's where Peter Jackson got the idea from the book, obviously. I shall get myself into a bit of training too, he said. I'll read two more pages. I'll read till page 92, and I'll end this read along here. See. At himself in a dusty mirror in a half-empty hall, he had not done any strenuous walking for a long time, and the reflection looked rather flabby, he thought. After lunch, the Sackville Banks' Obelia and her sandy-haired son, Lotho, turned up, much to Frodo's annoyance. Ours at last, said Obelia as she stepped inside. It was not polite nor strictly true, for the sale of Bag did not take effect until midnight. This is all like what useless information, right? About him selling his stuff to the Sackville Banks and all stuff, right? No one cares about this stuff. But Lobelia can perhaps be forgiven. She had been obliged to wait about 77 years longer for Baggin than she once hoped, and she was now 100 years old. Anyway, she had come to see that nothing she had paid for has been carried off, and she wanted the keys. It took a long while to satisfy her, as she had brought a complete inventory with her and went right through it. In the end, she departed with Lotho and the spare key, and the promise that the other key would be left at Gamgee's in the Bagshot row. She snored and showed plainly that she thought the Gamgees was capable of parting the holes during the night. Frodo did not offer her any tea, right? Blah, 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 right? He took his own tea with Pippin and Sam Gamgee in the kitchen. It had been officially announced that Sam was coming to Buckland to do for Mr. Frodo, and look after his bit of a garden. An arrangement that was approved by the gaffer, though it did not console him for the prospect of having Lobelia as a neighbor. Our last meal at Bag End, said Frodo, pushing back his chair. So Frodo is not ready to close to leaving the Shire, obviously. He's having his last meal, obviously, right? With Pippin and Sam, I believe. They left the washing up for Libya. Pippin and Sam strapped up their 3 packs and piled them onto the porch. Pippin went out for a last stroll in the garden. Sam disappeared. Again, this is not in the movie, man. The sun went down, back end seemed sad and gloomy and disheveled. Frodo wandered around the familiar rooms and saw the light of the sunset fade on the walls and shadows creep out of the corners. It grew slowly dark indoors. He went out and walked down to the gate at the bottom of the path, and then a short way down the hill road. He half expected to see Gandalf come striding up the bank. So Gandalf finally returned to Shire months later after they last met, right? The sky was clear and the stars were growing bright. It's going to be fine night, he said out loud. Like, that's good for a beginning. I feel like walking. I can't bear any more hanging about. I'm going to start and Gandalf must follow me. He turned to go back and then stopped for he heard voices just round the corner by the end of Bagshot Row. One voice was certainly the old gaffer's. The other was strange and some... Wait, did Gandalf return? Give me a sec here. Sorry. Gandalf did not return. He expected to see Gandalf come. So, sorry, I made a mistake there. Frodo expected to see Gandalf come, obviously. Right. I told you, if I comment and I make a mistake, you gotta bear with me, Lord of the Rings fans. I'm not well grounded in the book. And I wasn't born with a big USB whereby I'm able to grasp all of this information I'm reading. Sometimes, I told you, for me to truly understand Lord of the Rings, I have to read it like 3 times, man. If I really want to grasp the story, man, I have to read it like 3 times. For me personally, on a first read, I probably only grasped a good like 20% of the book on a first read, obviously. But now that I'm reading it a second time, I'm understanding it a bit better now, obviously. Expect to see Gandalf come striding up through the dust. The sky was clear and the stars were growing bright. It's going to be a fine night, he said out loud. That's good for a beginning. I feel like walking. I can't bear any more hanging about. I'm going to start, and Gandalf must follow me. He turned to go back and then stopped, for he heard voices just around the corner by the end of Bagshot Row. One voice was certainly the old gaffer's, the other was strange and somehow unpleasant. He could not make out what it said, but he heard the gaffer's answers, which were rather shrill. The old man seemed put up. No, Mr. Baggins has got away. When this morning, and my Sam went away with him. No, Mr. Baggins has gone away. Went this morning, and my Sam went with him. Anyway, all his stuff went. So Samwise Gamgee's saying, look, Frodo left with Sam this morning, obviously. So Frodo now left the Shire. He sold out and gone. I'll tell. Why? Why is none of your business over yours? Where to? They ain't no secret. He's moved to Bucklebury or some places that the younger. So Frodo gave the excuses that he's going to go live with Merry in Bucklebury, whatever it is. He's going to Bucklebury. Use that as an excuse to give a reason of him leaving the Shire. Because he knew if he left the Shire, it would raise a lot of questions among the hobbits. Hence why Frodo said he went to go to Bucklebury with Sam, when in reality he's going to Rivendell, whatever it is, for the ring, obviously, right? His quest of destroying the ring and all that stuff, right? Right? He's moved to Bucklebury, or some such place away down yonder. Yes, it is a tidal way. I have never been so far myself. They're queer folks in Buckland. No, I can't give them a message. Good night to you. Footsteps went away down the hill. Frodo wondered vaguely why the fact that I did not come up on top of the hill seemed a great relief. I'm sick of questions and curiosity about my doings. I suppose, he thought. What an inquisitive lot they are. He had half a mind to go and ask the gaffer who the choir was, but he thought better or worse of it, and turned and walked away back to back end. Pippin was sitting on his pack in his porch. Sam was not there. Frodo stepped inside the dark door. Sam, he called. Sam time, right? So Frodo's getting ready to leave, right? Coming, sir, came the answers from far within. Followed soon by Sam himself, wiping his mouth. He had been saying farewell to the beer bell in the cellar. All aboard, Sam, said Frodo. Yes, sir. I'll last for a bit now, sir. Frodo shut and locked the round door and gave the key to Sam. Run down with this to your home, Sam, he said. Then cut along the road and meet us quick as you can. So before I said Frodo left, no, Frodo's getting ready to leave. Obviously. Right? Frodo's not getting ready. I'm going to stop it here. Page 92. So far, chapter 3 is pretty much what? Chapter 3 is pretty much Frodo, Sam, and Pippin. They're getting ready to leave the Shire, obviously. It's been months, and Frodo's waiting. Frodo, he's been months since Frodo last spoke to Gandalf. He's expecting Gandalf to come back. Frodo celebrates his birthday with his friends and all that stuff. He expects Gandalf to get Gandalf to be there. Gandalf's not there, obviously. And Frodo, Sam, and Pippin are now getting ready to leave to go to the Shire. And he's telling people that he's going to Buckleberry and all that stuff. When in reality, he's going to Rivendell, as Gandalf told him, obviously, because Frodo's trying to give an excuse that way he can't raise questions. Remember how in the beginning of the chapter, Gandalf said, "Make sure you leave the Shire quietly. Don't raise questions." That's why Frodo had to come up with some bullshit excuse. Oh, I'm leaving to Buckleberry. When in reality, he's leaving. He's leaving to Rivendell. Obviously, he doesn't want the hobbits to raise suspicions. Obviously. Frodo also sold a lot of his possessions to the Sackville Bagginses. I told you. Remember before I said the Sackville Bagginses won his wealth? Frodo sold a lot of his stuff to the Sackville Bagginses, obviously. A lot of his possessions to the Sackville Bagginses. And now I'm on the part when Frodo was now what? He's saying his final goodbyes. Him, Sam, and Pippin are ready to leave the Shire. And he meets Merry along the way, I believe. And that pretty much sums up what I've read so far for what Three is Company, obviously. The reason why they call it Three is Company because it's Merry, Pippin, and Sam. And they meet Merry along the way. Whereas in the movie, it's Sam and Frodo leave the Shire, and then Merry and Pippin appear out of nowhere on Mr. Maggott's crops, which is very weird. That's why I told you there's a huge difference between the book and the movie. Remember what I've read about Frodo preparing to leave the Shire? None of that is in the movie, obviously, as Peter Jackson had to cut out a lot of things, obviously. Anyway, stay tuned tomorrow. I'm going to continue Chapter 3. Three's Company. You're looking at a very interesting reel for that. To all you Lord of the Rings fans, you guys stay tuned. You're looking at a very interesting reel for that. Stay tuned for my Chapter 3 continuation read along. This is Ivan Omer. I'm going to go get beer and smokes. Eat some shawarma. Enjoy the show. This is Ivan Omer. I'm signing out. Peace.